Hey everyone, Nick Marzinski here at trappinglight.com, and this video is supposed to be something of a companion piece to something that I posted over on my blog. So if you're just tuning in on the YouTube channel, you might want to click on the link underneath the viewer here to hop over to the blog and read the post before watching this, just to get the background on what I'm talking about. So I'm assuming that everybody's read the post, and I'm going to just start off with the obvious here. That's that Photoshop is a big sophisticated software tool, and it's really easy to, when you're confronted with how complex it is, to just kind of throw your hands up in the air and say, okay, I'm never going to be able to learn this. And yeah, if you approach it with that kind of attitude, that's probably correct. You're probably going to be right. You won't. And what I do when I'm confronted with something that's unfamiliar in Photoshop or something that I just don't understand what's going on, when I get to that point, I usually find that it's better to take a step back and goof around with whatever tool I'm working in, just to see if I can figure out how it works and what the mechanics of it are. So that's really what this video is going to be about. It's about an example of just goofing off in Photoshop just to figure out how something works, okay? And I'm going to show you how I do it just so that you've got an idea of here's a way that you can play within Photoshop to figure out how the program works. So what I do when this is something that I want to try is I start off with a blank document. So I just come up here and go to File, New, and not really that concerned about size, okay? And this is just a playground. This is just a sandbox. It's something for me to play on, okay? So I've got my blank layer. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add a shape layer. I'm going to add a polygon, and I'm going to set my sides to 6, okay? So I want a hexagon, because hexagons are cool. So there we go. There's my hexagon. Switch to the Move tool, drag it over to the middle of my, my document. Now there's one other thing that I want to try and do. I want to actually cut a hole in this hexagon because I want to figure out, I'm looking at drop shadows, and I want to figure out how a hole in your object is going to affect the way that a drop shadow works, okay? So there's lots of different ways to do that. You can, you know, with a shape layer, if we click on a shape layer, you can subtract from the shape layer and that sort of stuff. You just come up here and go to subtract from front, you know, from shape, but I don't really want to do that. What I want to do is I actually want to do something a little bit different. So I'm going to come over here to the text tool. I'm going to choose horizontal type mask tool. And then I'm going to just click here, which is going to turn everything red because it basically makes a quick mask of my screen. And I'm just going to type a question mark like that. And then I'm going to hit OK. Now, what you notice about the horizontal type tool, the mask tool, is that rather than actually typing the character on the screen as a text object, what it does instead is it makes a selection in the shape of the character that I type. So now I've got this question mark shaped selection box. I'm going to switch to my, I'm going to make sure the background is selected, switch to my Move tool again, and I'm going to grab this, there we go. And I'm going to drag it inside of my polygon, select my polygon on my layer stack, then holding down the Alt key, I'm going to hit the Add Layer Mask button, which is going to put a question mark shape mask hole, basically, using a layer mask in my hexagon. So now I've got a hexagon with a question mark in the middle of it. Okay, so there I go. I've got my reference image. Now at this point, it's time for me to start figuring out how the drop shadow layer style works. Now, for those of you that don't know what layer styles are, basically they're effects that you can apply to individual layers that are very easy to edit and that allow you a lot of control. They're non-destructive, so you can always come back and change them if you don't like the way that they look. Generally within, you know, regular photo editing, you're not necessarily going to use these a whole lot. And so this is a case where you're doing something that requires it, either a design or a photo composite or something like that, and you need to use a layer style that you're not familiar with. So that's why I'm building this, is because I want to figure out how this layer style works, and I just have something very simple to work with. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to choose drop shadow for my effects button here. If you're using Photoshop Elements, by the way, to access your layer styles, you're going to actually have to come up here to Windows and select the Effects palette, which will give you access to those effects. But in Photoshop CS or CC, it's right in your layers palette on the bottom using this FX button. So I've selected the drop shadow and it brings up this layer style box. Now, there's a lot going on here and I'm not exactly sure what most of this stuff does. So let me just kind of play with it and figure it out. I can look at the opacity. It doesn't seem to do very much. It just sort of sharpens the edge. I can see it sharpening these edges here, making them a little bit darker. So that doesn't really tell me very much. Let's take a look at the angle. Well, angle doesn't really tell me much either. Okay, that's kind of not really doing anything for me. Let's try distance. Okay, now here's something I can work with, because the distance, as you can see, just by playing with it, just lets me figure out how far I want to place the shadow from my original source. Okay, and now that I've moved it away, if I play with the angle button, now I can see the effect that the angle has. Basically, what this angle is doing is it's showing me what direction the light is shining from. So the light, in this case, is shining from this upper, upper right-hand side of it, shining through the document, through the object rather, and putting my shadow below it. But I can make that light shine from wherever I want to create a shadow behind the object. So that's really helpful. Okay, opacity, now that I can actually see what's going on, now I can see what the opacity does, and it does exactly pretty much what I expect it to. If it's all the way up at full, then it completely turns it black. If I drop it down, then I can go from, anywhere from white to black or anywhere in between, really. Let me just move that distance a little bit further. The spread, that doesn't seem to do very much, really, just looking at it like this. And let me move it over here so you can see what's going on. So the spread doesn't seem to do much. What about size? Okay, size kind of just makes it really harder to fuse. So now that I've got the size kind of somewhere, let's try spread again. Okay, now I can kind of see what's going on with spread. So it's really a case when you're playing with things to just try everything, try them in different orders, and see if you can figure out what each component of the tool does. Because like I said before, it's a complicated software package, and so to be able to have an object where you can just sit and manipulate things is very, very helpful. So I think I've got a pretty good handle on what's going on up here with structure. This is obviously a color box, so if I change this to red or blue, then I can change the color of my shadow. I think blue is actually kind of neat. We'll stick with blue. And then multiply, these are just blend modes. I kind of pretty much already know what blend modes do. And most of them in this case don't seem to do a whole lot. But since multiply is the default, I think multiply works in this case. All right, so the structure I've got down pretty good, and this is just through like a couple minutes of playing. If I come down here to contour, now there's other things here, and this is kind of weird looking at this. If I just click on it, I get this contour editor that looks something like a curve adjustment almost. So I've got these presets here, and just clicking through them, you can kind of see what's going on. This contour determines the effect that the shadow has sort of inside of the shadow. What kind of edge effects does it have? What kind of diffuse effects does it have? So that's actually pretty helpful. And now that I know that with this preset, when I see this editor, I realize that I can kind of come in here and make these changes and make my shadow look different depending on how I play with this curve. So just with a couple minutes of playing, I have a pretty good idea of what's going on with all of the sliders that I see here in this drop shadow layer style. And that's really the way playing with this sort of stuff works, whether it's looking at layer styles or looking at blending effects or even figuring out how certain layer adjustments work, whether it's black and white adjustment layer, a threshold adjustment layer, or something that you don't normally use. It's really, really great to just take a step back from an image that you may be working on and to just play with things and figure out how they work with some sort of tool that's some sort of image rather that's you're not concerned about the aesthetics of things, you're not concerned about what's whether or not this is going to be a good work of art. It's more along the lines of, do I understand what this tool is doing? So that's just food for thought for you to really think about. Here's how you can approach parts of Photoshop that you're unfamiliar with, because really the kind of stuff that you understand, that you develop here when you're just playing with it, is stuff that you understand, that you have a really good grasp of, because you can understand all of the mechanics behind it. So then later on, when inspiration strikes, then you've got a much bigger toolbox to work with as a result of playing with all of these different tools in Photoshop. So that's it for this tutorial. It's a quick one for me. I just wanted to get you thinking about how you can play around in Photoshop just to figure out how certain parts of it work. So hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them at the blog at trappinglight.com or on my YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.